Hello and welcome to the HellfireCast, the internet's #1 podcast which features irrelevant commentators and irrelevant topics. On today's episode, we'll be discussing one of the more notorious YouTubers out there. Now, you may remember us covering the Game Grumps in the episode How Not to Do a Playthrough, and in many ways this is kind of a spiritual successor to that cast. But while I do enjoy the Grumps' work when all is said and done, no, really, this person in particular has few, if any, redeeming qualities. I speak, of course, of Phil Burnell, aka Darkside Phil, aka DSP, aka the King of Hate. He has a lot of names, don't ask me why. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that I'm a bit of a critical Charlie when it comes to DSP, and no, I'm not talking about Gaming Brit here, but I felt I could express my opinions of him in a more focused and eloquent manner through a podcast. 140 characters per tweet only goes so far after all. Before we actually get to the backstory of the man himself, I just want to introduce my guests for this particular cast. From the HFC livestream, we have ex-gamer Richie and Yolka Ed, two of Vanbots.
Hello. Hello.
And in addition to this, I roped in one of our fans who shares my distaste for Mr. Burnell and likes to blast him on Twitter occasionally, Flaming Claw.
Hello, everyone.
Before we get on and give our general opinions about DSP and what we think of him, etc., I think a bit of backstory is needed. I'm just going to paraphrase from his page on TV Tropes here. Back in around 2008 or so, not too good with numbers, but I think that's in the right ballpark, he had a channel called Darkside Phil, the side spelled SYDE, and this was taken down by YouTube for false copyright claims and such, although this would eventually be reactivated and serve as an archive for footage predating 2011. He then went on to create a slew of new channels, got Google AdSense activated on the King of Hate HD channel, and thus became an official partner, much like HellfireComms is nowadays. He then sadly lost his job. I believe he worked in business. I don't really find anything particularly humorous about this, so moving on. His AdSense privileges were then revoked due to claims of fraudulent actions designed to exploit the AdSense system. Essentially, he would ask people, allegedly, to click on the ads and thus earn him money. He then went to Blip.tv and gained a partnership there, which is a bit funny because nowadays you do need to meet certain requirements to get a partnership. Back then it was kind of a free-for-all sort of thing. You know, you just joined up, you had a following, you amassed views, you gained money. I would know, I did it myself. Worked quite well, but YouTube is just a much more successful avenue for us nowadays. Time passes, and he would eventually get banned by Blip.tv. And I quote directly from TV Tropes here, due to some poorly thought out humour about the Holocaust. More of which later. Now, however, he's back on YouTube and he is partnered with Machinima. Flash forward to today and he has more haters than ever. He is a figure that draws much ire and, creates much frustration for people trying to do their own Let's Plays and people who just dislike him in general. I have a lot to say about DSP, as you may have noticed, again from Twitter, but I just want to go around this metaphorical table of ours on Skype and see what my guests think about this. Richie, let's start with you. What do you think of DSP?
Well, I was subscribed to Phil way back in the day, right near the start of his YouTube career, and I reasonably enjoyed it. I don't quite know what I saw, because obviously there was the whole crude humour and poor gameplay, but something about it was enjoyable.
Yeah, well, poor gameplay isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's how you work with that.
Exactly. And then it got to 2010, and because I remember him losing his job, and that was all very horrible. But kind of his upload schedule began to get far too much for me to cope with, and so I was just like, I'm sorry, I'm done. And then I kind of not thought about it until very recently when Tom began to talk a lot about it on Twitter, and then I was just like, I remember watching him, let's have a look at what's happened. And I have to say, I'm not a fan of what I see he has become.
Okay, cool. Yolk?
I wasn't actually subscribed to this guy or anything when he first started out. I only heard about him, I think a little after he got kicked off Blip TV. The first thing I ever watched of his, I remember this distinctly, was, I think some guys, friends of mine on the internet, just sent a video like, hey, check out this guy, what a dumbo. And it was the first part of his Bayonetta playthrough or so, where he infamously manages to not figure out where he's supposed to go during the tutorial. Now keep in mind, the tutorial clearly makes it clear that you're supposed to follow this angel carrying Enzo off to the distance through a hole in the fence.
Right.
He just examined the whole graveyard and didn't move on until 7 minutes had passed. And I was like, wow, is it really possible you didn't pick up on that?
So, poor observation skills and essentially not knowing how gameplay mechanics work in general.
Basically, yeah. So, that was the one thing, aside from his Blip TV facade thing that kinda got him off Blip. That was the last I really saw of him for a couple of years. Then Chip Cheesem, who is on YouTube doing Red to Prey along with his friend General Veronicus, he and Slow Beef put up a video called Colonel, I Didn't Manage to Avoid Drowning, where they take the piss out of Phil trying to play Metal Gear Solid 2. And I was like, I know that guy. I know that guy. Where have I seen him before? And then I just looked it up, and oh my god, it's that guy? That guy?
Yeah.
And it's just gone on ever since. People like Evil AJ and Chaffik's Grenade and the Kojima World Order, they've been making their own compilations, and I've just been watching those and been going, oh my god, how is it possible that this just keeps getting worse?
Yeah. Now, Flame, you and I converse on Twitter a lot, and obviously I know you have a lot to say about this, but how did you first encounter Phil?
I'm actually relatively new to the whole DSP craze, which I'm probably a bit better off than you guys for that, because I now have no kind of connection to him outside of what I've seen in the last year or so. But what's kind of struck me with Phil over other Let's Players, because let's be honest, there are a lot of bad Let's Players on YouTube and whatnot.
Oh yeah, especially this one group called HellfireCast. I don't know what the fuck their problem is.
Yeah. But with Phil, not only is he putting out substandard quality, but he's also taking personal offence at people who have criticised the quality of videos he's putting up, and that is one thing which triggers a reaction to me, because that's the sign of essentially someone not willing to listen to their fans and not willing to improve their content for them. And lastly, the way that he kind of pigeonholes all criticism of his content as hate or people being abusive or hating just shows that he just doesn't care about what he's putting out. And this is frankly why I don't like the guy and I cannot support his content.
Okay, how this podcast is going to work is that we've picked 7 topics to address. And there were quite a few more, but we felt these 7 were the most prevalent. So we're going to go through, hit them off one by one, and hopefully by the end you'll see just why DSP is as reviled as he is, and why it's not just all in his head. Topic 1, quality control. What he does and what he doesn't do. Phil started doing playthroughs, Let's Plays, etc., with a HD, a high definition camcorder. Now, this worked for him, like he said, but he would also sneer at people using direct capture and, say stuff like, oh, this isn't how you're meant to be playing a game. You're supposed to be sat in front of your television, with a drink and having a good time. First and foremost, this is your job. I really don't give a shit whether you're comfortable doing this or not. If you are, that's a plus and will most likely, reflect in the commentary as you're relaxed, you're focused, and you're able to do stuff in an efficient manner. But it's not a must. We're the audience, you're the content creator. Act like it. After many months of criticising the concept of direct capture and the people who use it, he would adopt the method himself. But this wouldn't change how he made videos. The thing about Phil is, he's not like the average YouTube Let's Player who posts, say, 1 or 2 videos a day, like we do. No, he posts about 10 to 20. All of them around 10 minutes long, so you get the maximum viewer retention. None of them edited, for the most part. There are a few exceptions here or there. He does this to earn as much ad revenue as possible and to draw in as big an audience as he possibly can. Most of these people are just looking for, the latest game footage and whatnot, and don't really care who's talking over it. They'll take what they can get. And the fact that he builds his business this way wouldn't really be such a problem if it weren't for the fact that there's no standards there whatsoever, apart from the video and audio balance, which is nice. I'll give you credit. It's something I struggle with, so I'll give you some slight props there. There just doesn't seem to be any level of care that goes into his videos. There's no analytical commentary. There's no humour of any merit, purely subjective, and something we'll get to in a couple of topics' time. But it's just something that sticks in my craw, because I can take up to sometimes an hour on maybe a half-hour, bit of footage, especially for games nowadays, because I developed a bit of an OCD quirk from recording Sonic Unleashed, so hopefully you enjoyed that playthrough, and hopefully it was worth it. But it just strikes me as one of the marks of a content creator who doesn't really care what his fans like. He's just gonna do it, and anyone else can go fuck themselves, really. He doesn't hold himself to any kind of quality standard. And Flame, I know you feel quite strongly about this, so do you want to say a little bit?
Yeah, I just don't particularly like the way that he uploads maybe 10, 20 videos per day, because as someone who watches a lot of Let's Play channels myself, I know that even when you've got LPers who maybe post one video a day or 2 videos a day, that can kind of be hard to keep up with. So if say you're a DSP fan and you wanted to watch his playthroughs, unless you're literally have a holiday break or whatever, it's physically impossible to watch everything he does, because he can put out 10 videos a day. That could be 4 or 5 hours worth of content, and that's just not something that I can spend my time doing when I have other people I want to watch. I have other things I need to do with my day.
It gets even worse for people because he doesn't even bother labeling his videos with what happens in them. It's just, let's say, for example, Dark Souls playthrough part 1, Dark Souls playthrough part 2, Dark Souls playthrough part etc, etc. He doesn't bother labeling it for people who want to see a specific section of the game in any sort of way. He just pumps out these videos over and over and over. He doesn't even bother looking at them, so anyone coming in fresh, they're gonna be confused, they're gonna be overwhelmed by this massive amount of content. They're not gonna be able to keep up at all.
Yeah, and there's no specific thumbnail for each video, because obviously that's effort. It's kind of ironic, actually, that he's complaining about views, which is something we'll get to in a later topic, that he doesn't mark, as Yolk said, specific parts with, say, epic boss fights, final boss, etc., because that, catches people's eye and draws them in. But as he said, but as Yolk said, he just puts part 1, part 2, part 3, and that's not particularly interesting. And that's how Hellfire Comms used to operate, actually. And to be honest, I can't tell Sonic Adventure Part 2 from Sonic Adventure Part 15. They might as well be the same video.
Something else about that whole naming structure and the lack of effort that goes into editing and all of that. Phil has the whole thing of, he does the live stream where he plays the game, and he's recording at the same time, and then uploads that footage to YouTube. So you end up in the rather difficult situation of the people who are your most hardcore fans will probably watch the live stream. In doing so, they are not going to want to watch the same content again on YouTube so many days later or whatever. And that kind of makes it so that the people who are your biggest audience aren't going to watch the content on YouTube because they've already seen it. And the people who just see it on YouTube are not necessarily going to want to watch it because they can't find what they want to find.
Exactly. This is something I actually struggled with for a while. There was a period, a down period in Hellfire Comms where I'd mostly be doing solo stream playthroughs. And, as you would expect, a lot of the fans had already watched this on the live stream. Sure, they would come back to the save videos and check them out from time to time, but they would never get as many views as, say, a regular one, and rightfully so. I would say, instead of doing that, he should just create highlights from the playthroughs. But of course, that would bring him less money and such, and, you know, for better or worse, he can't do that. It is his job. You know, I don't really like that term. I prefer to call it a living nowadays, but hey-ho. Any other points we can address in regards to quality control before we move on?
I would like to bring up a point about the way, as you guys have mentioned, Phil hardly ever edits his videos. That, to me, as well as coming off as lazy or whatever, it makes the entire video kind of unappealing to a viewer. Because what happens is that you can go parts where Phil falls down the bottomless pit or gets hit repeatedly, and that's just wasting time. He's making no progress whatsoever. And that, to me, it's boring.
Yeah, this is something I criticise the Game Grumps for a lot, really. And it involves zero effort on the part of the content creator. All you have to do is you cut a part of the video and the commentary, so basically you cut them both at the same time. You find a part where you want to cut to, chop there, remove the bits in between, splice them together, do a little bit of crossfade, boom, done. It takes less than a minute, roughly. Sometimes longer, if, you die a lot and you need to create a good segue. But it's not hard. It involves very little effort. It's just that Phil is extremely ignorant, and he prefers to do playthroughs his own way, which is literally just sitting on his arse and playing the game, which is, what I take issue with. Because my playthroughs aren't exactly professional, per se, but I take great care to schedule certain things properly, cover certain parts of the game in each episode, make sure we hit certain points, and so on and so forth. This is where the retakes come in, of course. But there's just no quality control in Phil's stuff. Most of it is Drek nowadays, which is sad because he used to have this series called Suicide Kings. It may or may not have come back, don't know. Don't particularly care. But the point is, you can't just shit out content and expect people to lap it up. Even your most hardcore fan is going to get tired. Give it a break. Maybe take a day or two off. Just sit there, relax, come back fresh, and then maybe you'll have better ideas of how to create content that everyone wants to watch, not just people looking for new videos. And I think that's all we have to say about quality control for now. Okay, moving on. Treatment of fans and haters. I have a few bits to say about this, but do any of you guys want to pop in first?
Well, I mean, I guess I can, because this is probably the thing that annoys me most about Phil right now. So, as I said, well, I think I've said before, I used to be subscribed to Phil, and at that time, he did the whole fan mail insulting thing, but there didn't seem to be as much vitriol for his fans as there is now. And the fact that the second someone disagrees with him or criticizes him, he just turns on them in an instant. And that just sits really badly with me, because there are so many people out there who put out much better content than Phil does, who receive a lot worse criticism. I mean, look at any video game developer. The amount of death threats some of them receive for just minor changes to their games is atrocious, considering the effort that they put in. But Phil doesn't put that much effort into his footage, and then as soon as someone criticizes him, he is just he insults them ridiculously, and that's not something you should be doing to your fans, the people who are supporting you and want you to do well, when you've got no leg to stand on.
Yeah, and it's got to the point where he doesn't seem to be able to recognise, the line in the sand where the fans exist on one side and the haters, for lack of a better word, exist on the other. There's so much generalisation. He's always oh, you guys are stupid. Never, this guy is stupid. Or very rarely, this guy is stupid. So it just creates this atmosphere of negativity, which is really ironic and something we'll get to later. But, it's no way to create content. It just leaves fans feeling, for lack of a better word, vulnerable Like, they trusted this guy, they liked this guy, and he just goes and shits on them. And even worse, he equates them to haters. And I have a lot to say about haters, but Yolk, I believe you have something to say on this matter.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up a very specific example of him just absolutely treating his fans like garbage. It's probably one of his major points of contention. It's the whole history of how he got his new computer. So how this all went was, while he was still doing, like, camcorder stuff, every one of his fans, like, they were basically telling him to go to direct capture, and him being so stubborn as he is, refused to do it. So this guy called Chris, I think, from Futaba Productions, he offered Phil to build him a computer since he was taking a computer class, and he basically said, look, if you send us, like, maybe $1,200, which isn't a lot for building a custom computer, we can get you set up. And after, like, maybe a few extra transactions, because they need to get some extra shit in, they send him a computer, and it seems to go fine. But then Phil can't stream his games properly because he has zero experience in it. And then he starts, like, blaming Chris and, this other guy, especially Chris. Like, he starts blaming them for just sending him a computer that's allegedly a fucking lemon and it doesn't work.
Ridiculous. What's funny is, he would say many things about Chris, but the one that stuck out in my mind is that he tried to paint it like he was doing them a favour by, like, going to them and having them build the computer. Sure, he paid for it, but really he could have gone to anyone. And he acts like some kind of god that, descended from heaven and picked a lowly mortal to create a great monolith through which his entertainment could flow.
It gets even worse when he starts conflating how much money he spent on it. Like, he spent like 12 to 1400 because they needed a couple extra to, like, fix the RAM or something, I don't know. And the RAM was kinda skewed. But then Phil starts saying, like, I paid, like, 1500, no, 1600, no, 3000 for this fucking computer. And
Yeah.
It just comes off at, like, I need your pity, guys. Pity me, the guy who said that this guy was a fucking idiot.
Oh, and it's all stored in literally thousands of receipts that I can't find right now because my apartment is filled with trash that I don't need.
In the meantime, Chris has the PayPal receipt, shows it in a video, and says, that's a fucking lie, Phil.
Yeah, I would like to bring up about the communication between a fan and a content creator, and this is something that is part of the reason why I'm kind of so involved, I could say, with Hellfire commentaries, in the fact that if I give Tom criticism, I know that Tom's going to read it. He may not necessarily agree with my criticism, but he'll listen to me.
Yeah.
And that's like, at the end of last year, I remember I wrote up a blog post about my thoughts on Hellfire Comms that year and gave a few bits of feedback. I know that Tom read it. I know that Spar read it. And that means a lot to me, the fact that care has been taken to, like, do what the fans want them to do. When I just can't bear the idea of this person who I look up to, who I enjoy their content, just basically shitting on me, just saying that you're a hater. It's just, I couldn't even begin to imagine how much that would, like, pain you, just to have everything you've come to love just, like, thrown back at you.
Well, which is funny because Phil himself says, "Oh, people have suddenly started turning on me. This is horrible." When in reality, it was probably just him being a bit of a dickhead. I myself have many negative qualities, and I have occasionally lashed out and not realised it was me being an asshole. Usually, this was just due to miscommunication and such. But you've kind of got to remain critical of yourself at all times if you decide to become a content creator. Your work isn't special. You are sitting there talking about video games in the case of Let's Plays. Stuff like with what, say, Chip Cheesem does is of a higher quality. He takes real care of his stuff, and I majorly respect him. I don't watch as much of his stuff as I would like, mostly because I'm busy with my own work, but he is kind of a standard you should hold yourself to if you're going to do Let's Plays. And Phil just doesn't care, and, going back to the topic, treatment of fans and haters, it's kind of blurred for him now. Criticism? No thanks. I am Darkside Phil, the king of hate, and I will do what I want, and balls to you, balls to your opinion. If you have an opinion, you are mentally ill. You need to have the white coats come and get you because there is something wrong. I wish I could say I was making that sentence up. It's paraphrased from one of his many, many blogs.
Yeah, that's kind of... It shows just how easily riled he is by these haters, as he said it. Because he can say, I'm not going to pay attention to this hater, or whatever, and then he'll spend like 20 minutes on his live stream going on about how they need mental help or whatever. And he's like, I don't know how someone can be such a walking contradiction for that kind of thing.
Well, I think that's enough for that one. Moving on. Racist, sexist, and otherwise distasteful humour. I think I will throw this one to you, Richie.
Okay. Now, with the whole thing of offensive humour in general, it can be done well on the internet, and it can be done well on video game playthroughs. I mean, one good example I can give of that is the Versus channel, which is Josh Jepson and Attacking Toucans. Sometimes what they say can be ridiculously offensive, but because there's no kind of malicious intent behind it, it's just them saying stupid stuff, and they know it's offensive, and they kind of generally point that out. You have kind of the crazier personality and the more straight-laced personality, and that balances out. When you've got Phil's type of offensive humour, the line becomes a lot more blurred, because it's never quite evident whether he realises what he's saying is offensive and how offensive it is.
Yeah, exactly. He has no internal filter.
Yeah, and that basically kind of makes things worse in a way, because you kind of constantly have to question, does he actually mean that? Is he really as slimy a personality as he is portraying? Or is he doing that to try and be funny, but it's not funny because I'm slightly concerned?
Yeah, and we have a prime example of this, but I just want to say before we get to it, like Richie said, you can do offensive humour. You know, you can do even racist humour. Not a fan of it myself. I prefer puns and wordplay, as I've mentioned many times, but you can do it, and I won't really judge you if you do so. Stereotypes exist for a reason, you know. It's like what Richie said. You can do offensive humour. You just have to have a sense of humour. You know, you need to think about what you say. Consider it carefully. You're not necessarily trying to avoid offending people. You just want to make sure it's funny enough so people don't turn on you. Comedians have to worry about this all the time, like Louis C.K., Gilbert Gottfried, etc. So, if you're going to do a racist or a sexist joke, especially racist humour, make sure it's funny. Don't just say shit like, just to give an example, in Metal Gear Solid, you have Mei Ling, who pops up from time to time to talk to you on the codec and such. And I think in that particular game, not so much the later ones, they may have changed her accent, but she has quite a thick Chinese accent, and often speaks in proverbs and whatnot. So obviously, Phil goes into this whole thing of mocking her, mocking the way she talks. It's like, oh, ching chang, walla walla, bing bang, etc., pretty much paraphrasing there. And without a hint of irony at all. I mean, it's not like Frankie Boyle, who would take the piss out of that type of thing and present it in, like, the guise of a children's television show. Like, hello children, shall we see who's behind the racist door today? Oh, it's Ching Chong Chinaman. No, nothing like that. You can't really get a giggle, unless you're, you know, just racist, out of someone mocking a Chinese accent with no actual humour there whatsoever. You know, you're not really saying anything funny with it. And another thing that stood out to me, this isn't the main example of his distasteful humour. We'll get to that in a second. He was playing Kingdom Hearts 1.5 on stream one day. Not very well, as you'd expect from DSP, but that's neither here nor there right now. And he got to Agrabah. And as you may remember, if you've played the game yourself, if you haven't, I'll just give you a bit of a visual image here. The Heartless in that world, the Heartless being one of the main enemies of the game, they wear waistcoats, like Aladdin, they wield scimitars, and they also wear turbans. You know, just kind of the Arabian kind of style. DSP described these guys as having turbans full of bombs. You know, a terrorist joke. Now, usually this wouldn't be something to rake him over the coals for, so to speak. Sure, it's racist and extremely distasteful, but it's not the worst thing he's ever said. You know, you put things in perspective. He made this joke on 9/11. Without a hint of irony, I doubt he even realised the significance of the date. And I've known a lot of people in my time, I've read a lot of posts on certain forums, that have said some extremely disgusting things, but they've never made 9/11 jokes or terrorist jokes on the actual day. You know, he has no self-awareness whatsoever. And I think we have to talk now about the most heinous example of his distasteful humour. It's not exactly racist, but it is extremely prejudiced. Phil was playing through one of the Dead Space games, and he was curb stomping the evil bad guys, I don't exactly know what they're called, and he was pretending he was like the last Nazi in space, and he was going around exterminating Jews. So, you know, Holocaust jokes. I wouldn't even touch those with a 6-foot barge pole myself, not even in the realm of something I find tasteful. But what was most evident here is that it wasn't funny. I would imagine if he told this like in a room of crowded people who enjoy his work, let's say, there would barely even be like a titter rising from these people. And he's all like, you stupid Jew, and now turn the ovens on. And I'm like, are you serious? You're a 30-year-old man talking about killing Jews. I can't even like imagine like a humorous take on this. And I don't think it's me being like sensitive or any kind of social justice warrior thing. It's more like, where's the funny, Phil? This ain't funny. You're not really telling a joke. You're just making a racist statement and trying to disguise it as a joke, which gives me pause for thought and makes me wonder: do you really hate Jews? You know? And that incident got him banned off Blip.tv. Good fucking riddance, and good on Blip for doing so, because that is not on. And of course he goes on YouTube and says, I don't know why Blip banned me, you know, this is stupid, people are against me, and so on and so forth, which is complete bullshit, because, you know, it was evident to anyone with a working brain, and even like one working brain cell, that, you know, it was completely his fault. But I'm rambling a bit now. Yolk, do you want to take the reins?
Yeah, I was gonna bring up, like, it doesn't just stop at racial humor or, like, sexist humor, or, I'm using gigantic air quotes to say humor here. It goes so far as he starts attacking, like, real-life people. Like, not just, people he, like, plays against in fighting games or something. It goes on to, like, he's spending entire videos of, like, say, the Metal Gear playthroughs, where he's just slamming Hideo Kojima for nothing that isn't just his own fault.
Yeah.
And it goes on to, like, BioShock Infinite, or Batman Arkham Origins, or The Last of Us, where for no real reason, he's just slamming Troy Baker. For no reason!
Oh, that thing where, like, in the ending credits, him and I believe the voice actress for Elizabeth are singing, The Circle Something Unbroken, and he's sitting there, he's strumming his guitar, and I'll admit, he's dressed a little bit like a hipster. That's not the thing that occurred to me when I first saw that. I was like, oh shit, it's suddenly live action, this is weird. I didn't sit there going, look at this stupid fucking preppy, he's wearing a scarf, what a fucking douche. Which is ironic, because Phil often sits there wearing a cowboy hat indoors, which makes him look like a right fool.
I have to say, that whole Troy Baker incident is one that I find rather just insane. Because, I mean, there are things that you can criticise about, including that The Circle Remains Unbroken clip in the BioShock Infinite credits. But you cannot criticise the singing, because it's a beautiful song, and it's really well done. And really, I mean, although Troy Baker is everywhere at the minute, he's a fantastic voice actor.
Yeah.
And Phil, in reality, in kind of plain simple terms, is a nobody like most of us on the internet. And Troy Baker's actually really successful, and he doesn't deserve that sort of criticism just for a choice that was made to put that clip in the credits.
Yeah, it's like he didn't sit there and go, okay, how can I annoy people? I know, I'll sit here, put my scarf on, and strum my guitar while the voice actress for Elizabeth sings. No, of course not. He's an actor, a voice actor, doing a job, and he got his paycheck. He went home, probably took off the scarf. Because he's got free will and all that jazz. Meanwhile, Phil's sitting there insulting a guy who I can't even give a reason. I think he just thought it would be funny, honestly.
Yeah, but there's the problem of him just sucking at telling jokes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, he's not funny. And I say that as someone who is particularly unfunny. But, at least I know how to string a joke together and not fucking guffaw at my own unfunny statements.
Yeah, that laugh, that guffaw of his whenever he cracks up at his own jokes, that is really one of my major sticking points, because it's a 2 to 3 second ear sore which just drones on every time he thinks he's being funny. Just this...
It's not even like that. It's not even that. It's like a seal deflating, like and he even claps sometimes. He claps like a seal who just got a treat. And I don't understand how he doesn't realise how silly this makes him seem.
Now, I personally wouldn't necessarily criticise the laugh as annoying as it is, if only because there are certain people on YouTube who kind of do end up laughing at things quite loudly. But I would say that they do tend to do that better, in the sense of, some people that I watch, kind of, if there's going to be a really loud laugh that is going to hurt your ears quite a lot, they will put a little note saying, just turn down the volume a little bit for the next bit. And kind of, that way, it's kind of, you're in on it, whereas whenever Phil laughs, it just kind of does come off as rather obnoxious.
Yeah, and, it seems like sometimes he laughs because he knows other people might not laugh. Like, he needs to give them a cue. Like when studio audiences look up at the sign that says applause and it's flashing, and obviously they have to applause and whoop and cheer, and they'll have to do this on numerous takes and keep it, consistent. Phil will laugh to let his younger fans, and there are a lot of them, know that this is funny and they can laugh now.
And I think with the laughing, it kind of needs moderation, because when you're playing for a game, something might happen that is hilarious and you kind of crack up over it, but that's not going to be after every little thing you say. I'm not just going to accidentally fall down a pit or something and find that the most hilarious thing that ever happened to me. It's just not going to happen.
Oh, I'm not particularly proud of my own laugh. It's kind of like a throaty, gurgling, chuckle, but I don't particularly laugh at my own jokes unless it's something fucking stupid, in which case I get the giggles and I'm just gone. That's when the special laugh comes in. But it's just it's an example of how inwardly focused he is, and we kind of devoted a bit too much time to this. So before we move on to the next topic, I want to cover his sexist comments. Now again, I want to paraphrase this by saying, I understand, okay? Heterosexual males, they like to comment on, pretty girls. That's fine. Never been like that myself, personally. Not outwardly, anyway. I was raised by my mum and my grandparents. So, obviously, that side of me never really developed. That's not to say I don't think about it. I just don't express it as, loudly and often as some people do. Phil, on the other hand, 9 times out of 10, when there's a woman on screen, he'll scream, "Oh, give me them titties!" completely without irony. And it seems if he's not, just being, sexist and misogynistic, he's pandering to his younger fan base who maybe not want to see that kind of thing happen. And not only is it disrespectful, even if they are, digital females, it kind of sends a message that he views these people as objects, which I'm surprised his own girlfriend hasn't called him out on. Yes, he does have a girlfriend, despite what you might think about the guy. And it's just kind of weird. What do you think, Yolk?
Honestly, I don't really have anything much to say about it. I mean, I can't really sit here and say like, oh, it's, you can't exactly make like, fucking sexist jokes or whatever, but it has to be, if you gotta do it, at least have some kinda self-awareness, some irony about it. Like, you know that you're just cracking wise. It's not like you actually mean it, which most of the time that's how Phil comes off like. Like, he's really wanting them today's, as he might say. But, instead of that, it's, more like, just have some self-awareness, just have some self-irony.
Oh, kind of went on for a bit too long in that regard, so moving on to topic 4. Never my fault, and I put this in quotation marks, as it involves Phil's level of gameplay. And I've separated this from quality control, because it's just on another level entirely. Flame, I think you'd be best to start off this particular section.
Yeah, when I'm watching a game and Phil's playing through what might be a particularly hard section, it might not be. There are quite a few times when he'll do something. He might fall off a cliff or something, he might get hit by enemies, he might drown, or if he's underwater or something. But he won't pay attention to prompts on screen of how to avoid, like, going wrong. And so there's a good chance that it's not the fact that the game is bugged, as he can put it sometimes, or that the game's just unfair. Sometimes it's just the fact that he's bad at games. And, like, I'm not going to flat out say that about everyone criticising games or whatnot, because sometimes there are cases where games are just badly designed and they need calling out like that, Sonic Lost World, or that sort of deal. But if a game gives you reasonable prompts on how to beat that particular section, and you go and do what the game has told you not to do, it makes you look like a bit of an idiot.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'll throw my hands up and say I've done the same exact thing on the live stream from time to time, but when it came to it, when I was putting that footage on YouTube, I did what Phil doesn't, and I edit out those mistakes. So while it might be an ordeal for people watching live, the people on YouTube don't have to put up with that. And in the case of Phil, it is never really his fault, and this extends to much more than just gameplay, but we'll get to that. And he goes on about how games are bugged. I didn't do that. I was pressing buttons and, nothing happened, which kind of leads into his whole shtick of him being involved in the fighting game community. Now, I don't know the exact specifics of this, but back in the day, like, I would say maybe around, like, early 2000s to mid 2000s, as he mentions often that he was too busy during that era of gaming with, the fighting game community to actually play any stuff, which is kind of like why he hadn't played Shadow of the Colossus until recently. And, fair enough. Not everyone has to play every game. I'm not, going on YouTube looking for expert level gameplay. If you make a mistake, that's fine. But it shows that you care when you edit around it, which, goes back to quality control, but we've already covered that. And the problem with Phil is, he calls himself a pro fighting game player, or ex-pro fighting game player nowadays. He says he's done with all that, even though he'll bring it up from time to time. And as far as I'm aware, the only, record I can find of him, being proficient in fighting games is when he placed 4th in a Street Fighter 2 Turbo competition. Yolk, I think you have a bit more information in this regard than me, though.
Yeah, this is kind of a... I don't have full details myself. I only have Mike Watson's, who's also in the fighting game community, his version of things. So what happens is, in a Street Fighter 2 tournament, they bring in a PlayStation port of a game. And this port is a shit port, let's be frank, because it had several kind of glitchy issues, like, let's say M. Bison the Psycho Crusher. The Fierce version of that doesn't go the full way of a screen when it's supposed to do that. Now, that was a version that Phil really, really played back in the day. So he was already sorta used to how it was, as opposed to everyone else who were used to more, better ports. So he manages to win that, and following that whole spiel, he starts advertising himself as the United States' best Street Fighter 2 player. And that's how he put himself on the map, so to say, in his own words. he'll go and play Street Fighter, and he'll talk about, I could have been Justin Wong, I could have been as good as Justin Wong, and if you don't know Justin Wong, he's basically one of the greatest Street Fighter players in history. And he goes on about this, and then he plays Street Fighter 4 online, and he gets his ass kicked multiple times, and then he'll just immediately backlash at the guy he's playing against, like, no, bullshit, I was lagging, the control was lagging, I was blocking, come on!
Another thing with Phil is that he has a habit of calling people who beat him online cheaters and claiming they have no life, and that is one thing which really, really annoys me, both in terms of cheating, because, like, there's a huge chance that they're not. Like, if someone's just beat you at a game, just put your hands up and say, well done, good game, mate. It's incredibly immature to start throwing around cheating cards when you have no proof for that. Nothing happened in the game that shouldn't have. And in terms of calling them out for having no life, maybe it's just their hobby. Like, everyone has their hobbies they dedicate a lot of time to, and the argument of if you just get really good at something you must have no life, it grates on me because, again, like I said, everyone's got their own hobbies and they get good at things they do a lot.
And here's the thing, he has like zero etiquette when it comes to this. It's not just that he, blames games for his own mistakes. He's a bit of an ass at the same time. His level of smack talk wouldn't even impress a 13-year-old, really. And it's no wonder he's been ostracized from the fighting game community, because Never My Fault doesn't really kind of fly over there. They have a phrase called no Johns, which I don't really understand myself, but the gist of it is, a John is a guy who will make excuses when he loses. I was tired, there's faulty buttons on this controller, joystick, whatever, etc., etc. And they generally don't put up with that kind of thing. And Phil, he's the kind of guy who doesn't like to take the blame, so he'll pass it off as lag. Which, honestly, you're probably going to experience from time to time if you're, playing online, to begin with, but also recording your match, through a stream. So you're putting, strain on top of something that's already trying its damnedest, to work efficiently. I think you've kind of forfeited the right to complain about lag when you're hosting a stream, no matter how good your internet may be. You know what I'm saying?
It gets even worse when he starts, bashing people for having laggy connections, air quotes, when he starts fighting against them and loses because, in his words, he can't keep up with their shit internet, or, if they're from overseas, this guy is just playing with shit internet because he's not from where I am, so the connection's not working, so he's not playing right. And then it gets into this other kind of meta level where, for instance, he's playing Street Fighter 4, and he picks the oil wrestler Hakan. Then the guy he's playing against picks a Guile, who's like a perfect counter. And then he's like, bullshit, he's watching the stream, counterpick, this match doesn't count, yeah.
Well, he wouldn't have been able to do that in the first place if he weren't streaming, so you kind of shot yourself in the foot there.
I mean, you've also got the thing of that could have just been complete and utter luck, and the guy just liked playing Guile.
Yeah, Guile's a cool character, and lots of people play Guile. Him included. And he still loses.
The point we're trying to make here is, if you do these kind of things, put yourself on the line, and just admit when you make a mistake. It is not hard, it may be a blow to ego, but you're not the one who's important here. Your audience is. They don't want to hear you, just sitting there and whining constantly, which is kind of ironic, given what I'm doing now. That's an example of self-deprecation, by the way. Having, the know-how and, self-critical nature that allows you to say these kind of things. Phil doesn't have that. In his world, it is never his fault, which is one of my main problems with him. Not the most major one, though. We're getting to that. The next topic is egotism and self-entitlement. Richie, I'm going to hand this one over to you, because you know a little bit about Phil's egotistical streak.
Well, it's basically kind of, whenever Phil does anything, you've got the whole thing of he's always right in the situation. It feeds in from the "it's not my fault, it's never my fault" thing. And Phil kind of holds himself up as the average gamer, and he constantly kind of feeds out that line, which in reality isn't true. He's definitely not the average gamer, because the average gamer does not upload all of their footage of them playing a game for the first time to the internet and commentate over it.
If anything, he's below average. He's shit at games.
Yeah, but even kind of taking that, he just kind of, he holds himself up as this paramount and kind of uses that to kind of lord over his fans, which also leads to his kind of negative reaction to criticism, because he can't necessarily see when he's in the wrong, and that leads to him using the term self-entitled of his critics.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly ironic, because he himself is pretty much self-entitled, because he entitles himself. He is the king, in big quotation marks, of hate. He kind of literally has entitled himself.
And I just want to read out the Urban Dictionary definition of self-entitlement here. A feeling that one deserves more than one actually does. Example, K-Fed has such a sense of self-entitlement. I want you all to just stop for a second and ask yourself what it is that Phil does. Is he a pro fighting game player, currently, touring around the country, going to different tournaments and such? Is he one of the most viewed people on YouTube? Do people praise his work on a daily basis? And I'm not just talking about the young fans who will swallow anything, or the people just popping by to see the latest game being played. What is it that he has done to become so well known? It's not his content, it's how he acts in regard to his content. He has basically painted a target on his head and complains that he can't, wipe it off.
Nowhere, anyway, is it kind of more prevalent in the fact that he calls himself the King of Hate. Because that name and moniker, he says, comes from the fact that people hate him, therefore he is the king of being hated, almost. And that's what he kind of wishes to portray, at least what I've seen him wanting to portray. But it's ironic, because that name, if taken literally, and as a lot of people would do if they were just coming to his content, he is the king of hate. He's the king of hating things. And that kind of by way of hate. So like he's hated and he hates people, kind of, it causes a conflict where the whole DS positive movement just doesn't quite work.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, DS Positive is a hashtag/movement that DSP set up to try and build some kind of positive flow to his work. It's essentially kind of a smokescreen effect, if you will. He was getting upset that people were making "this is how you don't play" videos, essentially compilations of his many fails in all the various video games he's played. You may have watched one yourself. We've got a member of HFC, Chaff Grenade, who's made several of his own. And these are quite funny. Phil views these as hate-filled montages, his words, not mine, and calls people who say such things self-entitled, saying that they're doing it to become popular. Instead of the more obvious thing that they're doing it to criticize Phil and have a laugh while doing so. And it's just kind of silly. I fucking hate the term self-entitlement or entitled. I think it's used by people who have no way of countering an argument, especially like when people criticize, say, Sonic games, etc., say, "Oh, you're just so entitled." And the feeling I get is that these people are saying, "You should just sit there and accept this game for what it is, because it's not like you can do any better." And Phil has used the same line of thought. And you know what? I don't have to do any better. I don't make games. I just play them. And if that's going to be your line of thought, why are you even joining the conversation to begin with? You obviously don't care that much.
Yeah, that is a terrible, terrible idea that people seem to get, that you have to be a master of something to be able to criticise other people. Like, I'm not a professional chef, but if my food tastes like shit, I'm going to complain about that. And it's the exact same kind of concept here, in the fact that despite the whole Web 2.0 kind of movement, there is still a division between content creation, content consumption. And as a consumer, I am actively consuming, and if I don't like what I consume, that's going to make me want to criticise it.
Exactly, and you'll give your opinion. The content creator can either, accept it, take it on board, not accept it, do whatever, ignore or flame it. But what Phil is saying is that because you want to give your opinion in a public comment section, I might add, he does not own YouTube, and as much as he would like to believe, he does not own his Justin/Twitch TV page either. No matter how many rules he splashes on that page, it's still up to Twitch to police and manage it. And he's essentially saying, you're self-entitled, or you're entitled for having an opinion. And he's kind of created this bubble around him, where he will just deflect any kind of criticism with, oh, you're self-entitled, you're selfish, you're only doing this for views, everyone hates me, it's a cult of hate. And it is embarrassing to hear these kind of words spill out of the mouth of a 30-plus-year-old man. Usually I wouldn't bring age into it, but being a man-child myself, I can spot one a mile away, and he is the prime example of one.
I would like to add to that a little bit, and this applies not just to Phil, but to anyone who kind of deflects criticism and that, is that yes, no matter who you are, there will be some idiot who's being flat out abusive to you, and that's something that it's wrong that it happens, but it's going to happen. But those people tend to be more vocal, so if you push away the legitimate criticism, the people who legitimately want to help you out and help you make better content, all 100% of what you see now is vile hate, and it only makes the situation worse for yourself in the long run.
And that's the thing, he kind of picks and chooses what is legit criticism, what isn't. One person would say, oh Phil, I didn't enjoy this playthrough, I feel you acted in such and such a way. He'd ignore it, but go to another comment where they'd say, oh Phil, I enjoyed this playthrough, I just didn't have time to watch it. He would say, oh, that's fine, thank you so much for supporting me. And this feeds into the whole manipulation aspect, in that Phil does these pre-streams on Twitch. He says it's to help, give people time to get to the stream. Mostly it's just for him to get on his soapbox and talk about stuff. A lot of the time it's about views, because he feels, because he does this day and night, that he is entitled to have these, views and the monies and all the accolades that come with them. That's the definition of entitled. You're basically sitting there playing video games, you don't edit, and you don't offer anything in the way of analytical discussion. Humour is subjective, as we talked about earlier, but I don't find it funny. So, apart from the fact that you're playing new games, which will draw people in anyway, and quite frankly, they're not always going to come specifically for you. I've had to learn over the years that, take for example, the Sonic the Hedgehog playthroughs that myself, Fastest Thing Alive, etc. used to do. Yes, I'm sure there's a lot of people who subscribed and tuned into the videos because they liked what me and Gareth FTA said. And when Sky and Sonic Movies / Steven joined, they like what they said. But you got to take into account the fact that Sonic is a massively popular franchise, and this goes for Kingdom Hearts as well. There's going to be a lot of people who just tune in to see gameplay footage. You can't always take it as oh, these people have tuned in personally to see me, and I enjoy that. Thank you, please continue to support me. It's just kind of this negative, again, self-entitled attitude that the whole world revolves around you. And the fact that you've put out a video just means it will draw people to it like flies to shit. And I find it very distasteful, in all honesty. And Phil will manipulate people. He will snidely say, or at least insinuate, that because you're not watching his videos, and the fact that you may be paying attention to other people, you're doing him a disservice. And he said, and I quote, if you allowed yourself to watch the videos criticising me of the many, many things that I've done, you were indoctrinated. He is implying that people have been brainwashed against him and he has done nothing wrong whatsoever. And it's just borderline silly, really. Actually, scratch that. It's flat out silly, and it's fucking stupid to boot.
I was gonna bring up one thing about this whole manipulation and self-entitledness. Like, he does reviews on the side, and one review he did of, DMC Devil May Cry. Well, after that went up, a couple days or weeks passed, and then he made a video where he basically told people, because that video had gotten, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 views, I don't know. And he basically told people, if you want to see this kind of video, this video where things are being edited and I'm cutting things and making it look real nice, if you want to see that, if you want to see this content anymore, then you better fucking watch it or I'm not gonna do it anymore. So it basically becomes like guilt-tripping people who wanted to see this kind of style of reviews. It's basically guilt-tripping them into clicking on it to watch it, or else he's just not gonna do it.
And earlier on in my YouTube career, I'm sure I've made this kind of mistake myself. It's just a desperation ploy, let's be honest. And he said, I put up a poll for people to, check out this particular playthrough, and no one watched the playthrough, and you know what, Phil? That's because people are fickle, and they don't always have time to, dedicate to this kind of thing. The world doesn't revolve around you, sunshine, and that is the definition of self-entitlement. You thinking you owed something you're not. Yes, you work, from dawn to dusk. That is admirable. I wish I had that kind of get up and go, but, and I've been rambling on a lot about this, and it's the whole egotistical nature and, how he'll throw the self-entitlement card at literally anyone who tries to criticize him. That, again, sticks in my craw. It's not on. You're a content creator. You're an old-ass man at this point, let's be honest. You're middle-aged, almost. Act like it. Don't be a child. Take that criticism on board. You may find it helps you improve your product and get the views you so desperately want. Moving on, we come to one of the biggest points of contention, hypocrisy. Please read us out the Oxford English Dictionary definition of hypocrisy, please.
So, the OED states that hypocrisy is the assuming of a false appearance of virtue or goodness with dissimulation of real character or inclinations, especially in respect of religious life or beliefs, hence in general sense dissimulation, pretense, sham.
To quote DSP, I'm a positive person. I don't just make fun of others. Now, there are numerous cases where you can find that that's not true at all. He just sits there for, tens of minutes at a time, blasting this person. And then we'll turn around and say, we had a good day today, guys, DS positive.
He does that a lot, actually. He'll say something really bad, say, if all you watch are, PewDiePie and Tobuscus, and that's all Let's Play is gonna be, then he'll immediately follow up with, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but if you do...
Yeah, it's like Slow Beef said, shit or get off the pot. If you want to say that you don't like these people, just say it. I don't have any problem criticising Game Grumps, and at the end of the day, I still watch them, because they do care. They may not show it all the time, they're just, focused on what they're doing, but they hold themselves to a standard. That I can respect. DSP, not so much.
Here's one instance, which is very recent, and you can see via his Twitter feed. And his videos, I would assume, as well. I haven't looked at them in a while. So, a while ago, Phil stated that he was not going to do any more Nintendo games because of the whole, Content ID debacle with Nintendo claiming lots of videos. Now, while that issue is obviously complicated, and a lot of people were unhappy with it, I'm neither here nor there because you're dealing with somebody else's content, but either way, Phil said that he was never going to play a Nintendo game again. However, very recently he just played Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which is a Wii U game.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous, it really is.
And the whole hypocritical thing comes back to the whole direct capture versus camcorder stuff. He kept going on for, years and years about how, he's not gonna do direct capture because that's not what real gaming is. But then he, caved to the pressure because, oh my god, I'm losing views, what do I do? Oh, I know, I'll go to direct capture because that's what people are into now.
Yeah, in terms of the way he's obviously changed his approach to playthroughs, going from the camcorder to the direct capture, it's showing how, for his sake, don't make it out that anyone who's doing something I don't do is bad, Because if it had been a few years ago, he was using a camera and he just said, "Oh, I don't want to do it at this moment," or whatever, just something like reasonable feedback, no one would have got anywhere near as angry at him as they have for him just going, "Actually, fuck that, I've got a capture card."
Yeah. And he likes to mention that he doesn't watch other people's content. And then there's clips of him going onto someone's stream and just bashing them because they have, like, more viewers than he's getting. Did you guys see this? I think it was, the Creature Hub playing a SpongeBob game.
Yes, I do remember that.
And he was like, "Oh, who's watching SpongeBob? Who's watching SpongeBob? Well, you know where the intelligent people are tonight, right?" And this all feeds into another thing. Whenever Phil talks about himself and his content, he says, "People want to see fun, entertaining, and intelligent content. And I'm sorry, buddy, but your shit's none of that." You know, you don't discuss the games, apart from general reactions like, "Wow, fuck, oh, shit," stuff like that, which any monkey with a microphone could do, let's be honest. And it's just so hypocritical. He doesn't get what he's doing, I think. And if this were an act, I think he would have dropped it by now, because goddamn, he's been doing it for long enough.
Interesting you say about whether he's putting on an act or not. It's something that strikes me. There are times when I think, no, he legitimately is this stupid, and there's other times when I think, you're pulling one, mate. And I'd like to bring up the Mega Man playthrough of his as an example of this, because when he started up Mega Man, he seemed to know quite a bit of like information about the game, like which bosses are hard, and he even did like a few tricks like the pulse trick and whatnot. Then he's made out that he was really surprised that there was the magnet beam, and he didn't seem to know how to work it at first or what it was. And that makes me think that maybe he's clocked on that he's assuming that his viewers come to watch him because they want to see a guy stumble around in games. And when it is a game that he knows, he thinks he has to put that on just because that's what his viewers want, supposedly.
I mean, another example of that is when he did The Secret of Monkey Island. Because I do actually remember watching that playthrough, and basically what happened was that he went through the game and kind of didn't really mention using a guide, and kind of tried to play it off as though he wasn't, and he was figuring this all out himself. And then later on, and I can't quite remember where it was, I believe it was probably in one of his other many videos, he was just like, of course I used a guide. Why would I be crazy enough not to? And so you've got that kind of thing of, there's a sense of a sham going on, which brings in the hypocrisy.
This is why I just like flat out stated in, say, Indigo Prophecy and Heavy Rain that there are parts where we'll need to use a guide for, less so in Heavy Rain as opposed to Indigo Prophecy, because Indigo Prophecy is a bit more technical. But he tries to, again, put up this smokescreen to hide the real him and present a more kind of misunderstood, fragile soul who can't really do any wrong, and this group of people is just bullying him. That's the term he likes to use, bullying. He claims he's bullied by all these people. First of all, and I can't believe I have to take this angle, you're a 30-plus-year-old man, alright? Grow up, deal with it. You're an adult. Most of these people criticising you are children. Either ignore it, or take steps to get rid of it, block it, move on. And it's just so shady that all these videos exist of him doing awful things, being racist, being sexist, you know, begging for views, then claiming not to beg for views, you know, discussing like how he's not going to address the haters, then doing like Christmas videos where he play acts at being a hater and does this whole kind of like nativity thing, which was a bit odd, to be honest. And he seems to think no one notices this, or rather, he seems to hope that his younger fans won't notice it.
It might just be sort of a refusal to grow up, sort of. Like, I don't know in what context this was, but one video of his is just him recording himself taking a shower.
Yeah, DSP tries this Axe body spray.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for linking that. I had nightmares that night.
You're welcome.
One other thing I would like to mention about the whole hypocrisy thing is, as Flame mentioned earlier, there's this whole mentality of, oh, you don't have a life. And the major example of this is in one of his Injustice videos, where this player called Counterhitter, he's played the DLC of Injustice, and he's played 1,000 matches because it's his hobby and it does it kind of pro style. He's probably one of the better Injustice players out there. Phil matches up against him, then he goes, "Look at this fucking loser! He's played 1,000 matches. This game has been out for 2.5 weeks. Grow the fuck up! Get out of your mom's basement!" Then he proceeds to get his ass handed to him.
First and foremost, that's just extremely immature. If you don't like what's going on, just say it in a more dignifying manner. Secondly, yeah, it's like you said, it's blatant hypocrisy.
He's uploaded over 20,000 videos. 10 to 20 a day.
Yeah, and HellfireCast has not yet hit 1,500, and we've been on here for 5 to 6 years.
I mean, I'm in a similar situation I've been going for, it's going to be 5 years this July, and I've barely hit 1,500. It's a ridiculous number of videos to have uploaded in such a short amount of time.
And granted, if he wants to do that, if that's his business strategy, fine. But you don't then get to turn around and call other people losers and whatnot. And he'll do it for some of the most petty reasons, like, oh, you don't have a girlfriend, etc. When, let's be honest, Phil, you got your first girlfriend or something, and she's a detriment as well. We haven't even touched on Panda Lee, because to be honest, yeah, the subject of this podcast is not about her, but I will just say, she's basically a female version of Phil, but 10 years younger.
It's actually, come to mention it, you saying his first girlfriend and that, I saw a video earlier of him, he was calling out, someone was insulting Panda Lee or something, and he was saying about how, I've had girlfriends before, you remember some of my old videos, I had girls in them, and Phil, mate.
I don't know what to say, really. There's a couple of things I forgot to mention back in the egotism and self-entitlement thing, in that Phil feels that the situation needs to revolve around him all the time. You'll see this with stuff like salty bets. He thought, that was stupid. He thought people were making real bets, which just goes to show how little he knows. And in regards of, Twitch plays Pokemon, he described the audience for that as 100,000 mongoloid children spamming. He thought it was just a couple of bots, competing. Not that it was a group of people actively trying to work through a game. And he called it illegitimate content or something, which goes to imply that his content and his content alone is the only thing that matters.
Yeah, and as you said about him not exactly knowing what he's getting pissed off about. If you're so filled with rage about something that you want to tell all of your thousands of viewers about how awful it is, at least just do a little bit of research. Make sure you're right, because you're going to look like a right tit when you're actually proved wrong.
Yeah, he uses the word allegedly a lot as well, just to try and give himself an out. And God knows I've done this in the past, so, hold my hands up, admit to that. But, first and foremost, okay, Twitch Plays Pokemon was much more impressive than any of the shit he puts out on a daily basis. Like I said, they're not marked, these videos. They essentially could be copies of each other, and I wouldn't know the difference. And, it's just a little bit sad, really. And, we've come to the last topic of this little cast, the backlash, how not to handle E-Fame. I'll start with this one. When you become a content creator, and especially if you get paid to do this, I feel there's a certain standard you need to hold yourself to. And it doesn't have to be expert level commentary or gameplay, but I feel there needs to be a cut-off point where you can say, I'm not proud of this, it needs to be redone. With Phil, there is no cut-off point. It's just one and done. He wants to get his and then get out. And it's slimy, it's shady, and it kind of makes other YouTubers, and I will include myself in this, look, if not bad, but very unprofessional, and it kind of just paints us all in a negative light.
That's actually something that I was wishing to bring up as well. I mean, you've got so many people who put in such great amount of effort, you, Tom, yourself included in that, And then you have people like Phil who just seem to put so little effort in, and yet, because they're popular, that's what the rest of the world sees when they look at people doing playthroughs. And it's just like, what are they on?
And, he deflects all criticism. He doesn't bother to, try in his playthroughs, which is hilarious, by the way. We should have brought this up in the hypocrisy thing, but we're kind of all over the place now. The phrase, I can be good at games, if I want to.
God, that's such fucking bullshit.
If that was the case, you'd be schooling chumps left, right, and centre on these fighting game streams, you being the pro fighter that you are.
One other thing I want to bring up, from his Jack and Daxter playthrough, he spends a part in, I haven't played the game, so I wouldn't know myself, it's in these mines, and basically he goes on this 8-minute tirade about people who have been telling him, Phil, what are you doing? This game is not as challenging as you make it out to be. I beat this game faster than you when I was 8. Then he, starts bashing them because, oh, so you're saying you did, a perfect speed run of a game when you were 8? No, you did not. And just, lashes out of these guys for petty reasons, and it takes up the majority of the part. It's sad, really.
Yeah, it's quite a lot of the time. I'm not sure whether Phil's genuinely confused or whether he is just pulling a straw man, because when people demand quality, I know we've kind of touched on this, but they're not saying they want 100% no hit, no death, or all this sort of crap. They just want it to be watchable. They don't want to watch you just make the same mistakes 20 times in a row. They just want it to be a little bit better.
And the worst part is, he won't learn from any of this until it starts to affect him negatively. He'll bleat about, oh, I'm trying to do the gaming world a favour by doing all these videos. We haven't even, touched upon his, political videos, where he talks about, SOPA and such, and claims that he was one of the driving forces behind getting it repealed. You could probably make a video in and of itself on that shit. And people have. But, until it gets to the point where he is, in such dire straits that he has to turn around, he won't turn around. And that's really the problem with DSP. He is, by far, the worst case scenario when it comes to doing this for a living. This is how you don't pursue a YouTube career, essentially.
There is so much variety of ways in which to do playthroughs and commentaries. I mean, you can just look up anything and you'll probably find someone dealing very much in the music element of things, or someone dealing very much in the comedy. But the manner in which Phil deals with his channel just has reached the point where it now leaves a sour taste in the mouth for a lot of people, and it's disappointing that he doesn't seem to want to learn from that.
And he goes on about how he wants to be remembered, which is very narcissistic, but I think all of us as content creators worry about the lasting effect of our videos. And when people look back at, say, Hellfire Comms, I doubt they'll think much. Other commentary groups will come along and replace it. When they look back at DSP, they'll see a load of content, none of it really much interesting, and a guy who was basically a monolithic figure of hate, despite what he would say to the contrary.
Well, I mean, further to that, I mean, the idea of being remembered is prevalent throughout history. I mean, you can look at books and texts all the way back to the Middle Ages, and they are intensely aware of the fact of wanting to be remembered and wanting their texts to be read by people. And you have a vast amount of texts. And so that's why you end up with things where people lift it up and just this is excellent literature, and this, Twilight or what have you, is not good literature. And it's that kind of thing. It's an issue that humanity is very interested in.
Yeah. And in terms of, again, wanting to be remembered, I know this is kind of a dead horse at this point, but when you put out so much content, not as much as it will be memorable, especially when it's as unpolished as Phil's content, because, in terms of Hellfire and that, we remember certain moments just because that was either a well-crafted moment or it's a particularly funny moment, say FTA's rage at the guy in '06 and whatnot, and other examples like that. Whereas with Phil, he's pumping out so many things, it doesn't have that sticking effect. It's not as memorable.
Yeah, it doesn't really last into moments per se. Like, I think if he's really concerned about being remembered and stuff like that, one thing people are gonna remember about him is not any particular playthroughs he's done, not any particular moments that he's been involved in. People are just gonna remember this 30-plus-year-old man-child screaming and whining and not getting his way, and basically that's pretty much it.
And we have come to the end of this rather long HellfireCast now. And if you haven't picked up on it, I don't particularly like DSP, and what he stands for is not what I and the rest of the group stand for. And I've had a couple of people say to me, you wanting to discuss this like officially, like in a video, is kind of petty. On some level I can agree with that, but the thing is, you don't get rid of a problem by ignoring it, and Phil is a problem. He represents the absolute worst of the gaming community, and if you allow that to fester, and you allow that to grow, which is what he wants his fan base to be ignorant as possible, so they keep tuning in and filling his coffers. That's how he's able to make a living, by doing the absolute least amount of work possible and gaining, the biggest profit margin. And that's not any way to treat your fan base. These people, especially in the case of Hellfire Comms, literally put their hands in their pockets to support you, and you offer them just the bare essentials. And I don't agree with that, and I never will, to be honest.
I'm exactly the same here. It's just, fans give you so much, and in a lot of cases, there are times where a fan will put a comment that is just really wonderful and makes you feel really glad that you've put out that content. And I mean, I have seen a couple of instances where Phil has said that someone has said something that's really lovely, and he's kind of made to feel better about that. And the fact that he then treats his fans with such a disrespect, and it disappoints me to see that this is what he has become, because I did used to enjoy him when I was younger.
I think the sad thing about this whole thing really is, as has been mentioned, there have been ways for him to turn around. Like, if it's not just the whole matter of, don't just use the camcorder, go to direct capture. It's just the matter of his attitude. If he could just switch up his attitude, like, stop being so negative Nancy about everything that happens to him, like, if he could just try and do that, things might have turned around. But as it stands, like, I seriously think he's gone to this point of no return. Like, the only way, as Slowbeef put it in his podcast when he talked about this, the only way I could foreseeably see him, like, turning this around is literally going 180 and straight up saying, I am so sorry for all this time and all this abuse. I am so sorry, and just immediately try and clear out all the bad wind. That's the only way I see things improving.
As much as I would usually like to see an art as a separate piece from the artist, like, say, when musicians have scandals come out of them doing things wrong and whatnot, with Phil, that's kind of impossible, because for every part he does on topic, he'll then make like a 40-minute rant about someone hating him, and that kind of overwrites it, because he's still using his stream, he's still using his YouTube channel for this, and it kind of blends together. So I'm not just seeing a playthrough of this game by Darkside Phil, I'm seeing Darkside Phil shouting something, also a game, and that kind of makes it impossible to separate the two.
It's very telling that when you literally type in DSP on YouTube, you'll get all these hater videos, because that's what he is. He is a hate-filled individual who doesn't want to put the work in to be able to bring home the money, and that is what you have to do. That's why I pawned my britches up and just got the fuck on with it, because you can't get something for free. You really can't. And even if it's in the case of donations, you still have to put in the work to make people want to support you in such a manner. And if any of you out there are thinking of starting up a Let's Play channel, don't take the easy way out and coast. Get the equipment you need. Say what you like about the games that you cover. Say what you don't like about the games that you cover. offer your opinion. Don't offer a reaction, like a simple reaction, like, oh, fuck this, and this guy's stupid, etc. That's boring. That won't be remembered, and quite frankly, I don't think anyone needs to see it. Be analytical, or be comedic, or be a mix of both. Just offer something substantial. And my voice is actually starting to give out now, which is a rarity. So I just want to thank Richie, Yolk, and Flame for joining me on this cast.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, same. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Tom.
And if you'd like to check out the videos we've been discussing in this particular HellfireCast, you can find them linked below in the video description, along with a bit more information about stuff we didn't really have time to cover. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay DS positive. Bye bye for now.